try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people.
And Veterans Speaker Forum. Tonight, Colonel Retired Grant Newsham will be talking to us about why people in the United States should care about a conflict between China and Taiwan. Now, first, be aware that we will be recording this event for the benefit of those who are not able to be here tonight, and it will be posted on our channel. Second, we will be sending you messages in the chat, so please keep that open for the duration of the event. Now, I want you to have a quick introduction for those who may not be aware of Braver Angels. Braver Angels is an organization created to bring Americans together and to bridge the partisan divide and strengthen our democratic republic. Our military and veterans group is one of many specialty groups within Braver Angels, and our specific mission is to bring together veterans and those of military service that have instilled in them the importance of unity, teamwork, and a country-first mentality in order to promote the Braver Angels mission and grow the membership base. Now, our goal in hosting these events is dual purpose. First, to offer that invitation to our fellow veterans to join us in working to reduce polarization in our nation. And second, to offer our fellow Braver Angels a military perspective with which they may be unfamiliar. Now, quickly our agenda tonight. We are going to first listen to Colonel Newsham's presentation. Then we are going to send all of you into small breakout rooms so you can discuss with others what you heard, and as groups, come back with questions you would like to ask Grant. After about 60 minutes of questions from you, I'll provide some closing remarks. A few last pieces of admin, beginning with introducing my team. Donna is our breakout room manager, and we'll be putting you into breakout rooms. All of that should happen for you automatically. Marietta and Jeff are our participant managers, so please reach out to them in the chat if you have any questions about the program tonight. And Dennis is our troubleshooter, and his number is being posted in the chat. Contact him if you get disconnected or having other technical challenges. Now, during Colonel Newsham's presentation, we will be keeping everyone muted. So later, when you are in your small groups, you will need to unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon. Also, closed captions has been enabled, and you can turn those on by selecting the three-dot icon below your display and selecting closed captions. And now the reason why all of you are here. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Colonel Grant Newsham. And I want to start by giving you a bit more background on our distinguished presenter. Colonel Newsham has spent the last 40-plus years following the People's Republic of China and is a senior research fellow at the Japan Forum for Strategic Studies in Tokyo. He is a retired U.S. Marine colonel with many years of experience in Asia. He served as the reserve head for intelligence for Marine Forces Pacific, which we would refer to as MARFORPAC, and was the U.S. Marine attaché in Tokyo on 2 occasions, and also the first U.S. Marine liaison officer to the Japan Self-Defense Force. In this later role, he actually helped create Japan's amphibious force. Colonel Newsham lived in Tokyo for over 20 years and worked for Morgan Stanley Japan and also for Motorola Japan. He is a former U.S. Foreign Service officer with work covering a number of regions, including East and South Asia, and he specialized in insurgency, counterinsurgency, and commercial matters. He even had a small role in what is known as Charlie Wilson's War. Additionally, he lived in Taiwan in 2019 on a Ministry of Foreign Affairs fellowship, working on a proposal for improving Taiwan's defense capabilities. Grant is also an attorney, speaks regularly at a variety of forums on Asian defense, economic, and political matters, and is widely published and often interviewed, and has written When China Attacks, A Warning to America, published last year by Regnery Publishing. This evening, Colonel Newsham will discuss his thoughts on why Americans should care about a conflict between China and Taiwan. Sir, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Ted. I appreciate it. And I must say, whenever I listen to an introduction, I'm always reminded that I've got a really short attention span, or I get fired from every job I try. But I appreciate the introduction, and it's fun I like to talk about Taiwan because I've been there, and I suspect many people on the seminar have as well. And it's really quite a place. It's somewhere where you really get a view of what China could be, because you will often hear from Beijing that, well, the only way you can govern Chinese people is with a boot on the neck, the way we do. They can't handle freedom otherwise. Well, across the strait, 90 miles, you've got this example of Taiwan, where it's a vibrant democracy, free press, freedom of speech, everything that we would take for granted. And it really gives a lie to the argument that only force works with Chinese people. And the Taiwanese people would actually tell you that, well, they're of Chinese origins, but they don't really see themselves as Chinese in the mainland sense. But it's obviously a hot topic, and I think for good reason. But I think for people who don't live and breathe Asian defense and this sort of thing, it may not be all that obvious, and you might not even know where Taiwan is or why it matters. And those are fair questions to ask. It'd be like asking me about some islands in the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's important to talk about it, and hopefully I can offer a few ideas of how one might think about Taiwan. And I would note that I'm not the last word on these things. So the idea is to just present some ideas, information, and you all can make up your own minds if you already haven't, in fact. And so just to be helpful. But what I'd like to do, Ted, is if we could start with a map, because I think it's helpful to understand the geography, or at least have it in mind. So if you could show the one, if you could try the other one, the one with the arrow. This one will come later. Okay, well, you can see this is a map of East Asia, and right in the middle of that blue arrow, close to the Chinese mainland, there's Taiwan. And it's worth look at this for, it's not entirely clear, but it is right about in the middle, a little to the left, is Taiwan, not far off the coast of China. The strait is about 90 miles wide. Now, when you look at this map, there's something called the first island chain, and this is what we think about, and the Chinese use this expression too, and it's this chain of islands that runs from Japan up in the north. Then it goes through Taiwan, then down to the Philippines. You can see that farther to the south, and then on to Indonesia, to Borneo. And you can see how it is literally a chain. And what it does is it blocks the Chinese from the Pacific. And it's an excellent defense position for the Americans and the West and everyone else if they choose to use it. And they kind of do. But if we could move to the next, but the point is to remember where Taiwan is. And I just want to orient you. And Ted, if you could show the next map, please. Okay. Now this is a map it's oriented as if you're looking out from China. And once again, if you consider that, you see the first island chain listed, described on there from Japan, and there's Okinawa, the southern part of Japan, and then Taiwan, Philippines, and then Indonesia. But so when you're looking at this from, say, a Chinese strategist's position, and you look at it and you think, well, if we want to get out anywhere, if we want to get out to the Pacific, well, we have to get through this chain. And that's something, so this is something I want you to keep in mind, because I have found that when you look at a map that is oriented from the Chinese perspective, it really is it's more effective, I think, than reading 10,000 words on Chinese strategic thinking. You can see the Chinese problem very clearly. Okay, Ted, if we can take the maps down so everybody can see me. Now, what I would like to start off with is the main points, and this is how I see it. And looking at why is Taiwan important? Why does it matter to Americans? Well, there's several reasons, main reasons that I would like to offer. And the first one is from a military operational perspective. As you saw in the map, Taiwan is right in the middle of the first island chain. And if Taiwan comes under Chinese control, it's really the equivalent of, say, the walls of Constantinople being breached in 1490 or 1453, whenever it was, or any castle wall being breached. And suddenly, the attacker has free access into into your territory. And from those standpoints, it's essential that we can see Taiwan's importance. If it goes, the wall has been breached. And at that point, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese military, it has the ability to swing it from operating out of Taiwan. It can swing up to the north and isolate Japan, even surround Japan, be the first time Japan had been surrounded and threatened like that since 1945. And it can also operate freely down to the southeast, which means Australia can be isolated. And this is actually what Chinese thinking is and what they intend to do. But Taiwan is this cork almost that keeps the PLA bottled up behind that first island chain. And it's important to keep in mind that China's objectives, and they're very clear about this, they're not just to take Taiwan and then say, okay, we got that out of our system, now let's get back to the way things were, but rather their objective is to drive the United States out of the Pacific, and that's for starters. And they are setting up the infrastructure already on the east side of the Pacific, throughout Latin America, Central America. They're building ports and airfields for commercial purposes, of course, civilian purposes, but the real reason is to set up the infrastructure for the PLA to eventually operate throughout the entire Pacific. And it's one step at a time, and this will take them some time, but this is the objective, is to control the entire Pacific and ultimately the entire world, and they are building a military which is built with that end in mind. So this is really the military perspective. So looking at it that way, this is, I think, pretty clear evidence of Taiwan's importance, and that's just from the military perspective. But like a lot of things, military operations are not the be-all and end-all. There's often a political, psychological aspect to military security operations. And one of these, if you consider the fall of Taiwan coming under Chinese communist control, think of the message that sends. It would show that the United States, with the U.S. military, the U.S. with all its economic and financial power, and its allies, could not prevent 23 million free people on Taiwan from coming under Chinese communist control or enslavement. That they couldn't stop it. And even more importantly, U.S. nuclear weapons couldn't stop it as well. And that would, as I said, have a psychological, political effect, which would ripple far and wide. Say confidence in any country's sort of belief, either explicit or implicit, that the United States would protect it, would be sorely rattled, or even could protect it. And I think it's fair to say that overnight, the Asia would turn red. I think we hear this cliche now and then, but it would happen. If Taiwan went under Chinese communist control, I believe that you would find nearly every country in Asia cutting the best deal they could with China. The exceptions might be Japan, and they would be rattled. And I'm not sure the U.S.-Japan defense agreement would survive the fall of Taiwan. But Japan would not voluntarily come under Chinese control, but they just might find themselves under Chinese domination, particularly given that Taiwan sits astride the South China Sea, the sea lanes which go through the South China Sea, through which most of Japan's energy most of its trade actually flows, and the same goes for South Korea. So even South Korea would probably have to cut a deal with Taiwan. The Australians, they wouldn't like it at all, but I'm not so sure even today that Australia can defend itself. And it just doesn't have enough people, doesn't have a military, and if Taiwan were to fall, even I think that Australians just might try to reach an accommodation with the Chinese. Now, those are those are some the bottom line, as I see it, is why it's so important that we do something for Taiwan, or Taiwan's importance to America. It's not just a bunch of rocks; it's strategic geography, if there ever was. And really, America's prestige is at stake. And this would be, as I say, it's prestige worldwide as well. Now, you'll often hear in the debate over Taiwan that one of the main reasons we have to defend Taiwan, or why it's important, is because of chips, semiconductors. It is true that Taiwan manufactures, it's about 30%, I think, of all semiconductors. About what's the figure? About 50% of all outsourced semiconductors. So when a company has someone else make them, Taiwan makes about 50% of the chips, but 90% of high-end chips are made in Taiwan, and those are at risk, obviously. And we saw what happened just a couple of years ago when there was a semiconductor shortage. That caused all sorts of problems, and I even had to buy my daughter a car at the time for about $10,000 more than I would have liked to if there had been chips more readily available. But I think, and so people often say that, well, China would either wouldn't attack Taiwan too hard because they don't want to destroy their semiconductor business, or they say that what China really wants, their real motivation, is to get China's semiconductor industry intact and have it. But I think that actually, to me, that this is gravy for the Chinese communists if they go after Taiwan. If they get there and take it and the semiconductor industry is still intact, well, that's even better. But Ted, if you could once again show that map looking out from China's perspective. Okay, thanks. I just want to show this once again for just a few seconds. And imagine, once again, imagine you're Xi Jinping himself, and you look at Taiwan, and the geography is just so enticing. If you take it, it's free sailing into the Pacific, north, south, and all the way to Latin America. And so that alone, I think, is enough motivation for Xi Jinping and for the Chinese. So thanks a lot. We can take that down now. But it's always worth remembering the geography. Now, also think about it. And there's some other reasons of why Taiwan really matters. Is if you look at the sort of as I said, the ripple effects, but the economic effects of a fight over Taiwan, just even a fight, regardless of who wins. This would be just an absolute disruption to global trade. So many of supply chains, a lot of finished products, manufactured goods, raw materials come from China. We've gotten ourselves dependent on the China market over the last 30 years. Not just, and certainly not to buy our stuff, but rather the things we need from China, and particularly things like pharmaceuticals, the drugs that keep some people healthy. Too many of the precursors and actually the finished products come from there. But this would all be disrupted if there was a fight over Taiwan. And this would, I think, also cause huge financial problems. If you remember the 2008 financial collapse, and you would have business activity slowing, and I think you would probably have the potential for real social unrest. In the U.S., no less, besides other places, you would just have this slowing of business, and social unrest has a way of leading to political unrest. And this would, I think, be the inevitable outcome of a fight over Taiwan. And a fight over Taiwan probably would not be a Monday, start on a Friday and finish it up by Monday sort of affair, but it could easily turn into a global war. And you also might find, when you're considering it from America's perspective, that if there is a war or an attack on Taiwan, the world could easily split into two blocks. I would call those one, the free America and the free world, and then the rest of it, say China and its Russia, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, those people. But also, I'm not so sure how the other parts of the world would come down in the event of an attack on Taiwan. I think you might find actually that in Africa, Latin America, in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, I think that many countries might either say, "What's the big deal?" or we don't want to get involved, or even that, well, China really is the big dog. They took down the Americans. The Americans couldn't do anything. Maybe we should bandwagon, side with them. And then America at that point finds itself with a lot less political support, a lot fewer friends in the world than it thought it had. And once again, its reputation diminishes. And you could also find the US dollar isn't so attractive anymore, and the Chinese currency is. And that dollar really is the last real lever that we have over the People's Republic of China. But that could be an outcome. And you might also find that on our side, that even some of our friends, say in Europe, for example, just might say, well, Taiwan, it's so small, so far away, nothing we can do. We want to avoid World War III. We're actually going to stay clear. We love you, America, but we're not going to help you out here. So America could find itself, if not alone, with a lot fewer friends and a lot less power and prestige than it currently has. And that's something really worth keeping in mind. So the question here, if you think about what I've described, is what does a U.S. government do? Now, of course, it can do everything it can in peacetime to try to prevent China from going after Taiwan. And just simply so Beijing looks at the cost benefit and thinks, if we do this, it's just going to be too disastrous for us. So we're not going to. And then if you can avoid a fight, I think that would be a nice thing to avoid these problems that I've mentioned. And even if somehow the Taiwanese held out with American and Japanese and a few other people's support, it would cause so much disruption, I say, to the world as we've known it, that would be a whole different world than any of us have experienced. So you can see the hard part at the end. But if that happens, if say that somehow China does go after Taiwan, at that point, what does an administration do? I think you can see how difficult the challenge is. Do you go all out against, to try and save Taiwan after the attack has happened? Do you go to war with China, nuclear armed China, risk World War III? It's a decision. It's going to be some very hard decisions made. And I don't envy any administration that has to face those choices. But also, I think America would no longer be the superpower that it is. I think that's a fair assumption. I think it really comes down to Taiwan. And so I'm trying to get across some ideas why I think it's so important and to Americans. And I just like to run through a few sort of other things before I conclude my remarks. And that regarding China's capabilities of attacking Taiwan, the experts differ, and these are fair differences. Personally, I think that the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese military, actually is able to at least think that it could attack Taiwan and have reasonable prospects for success. It has built up a military over the last 20 years in particular that has been really built up to do two things. One is to take Taiwan. The other is to defeat the United States or of America, or to keep it from coming to Taiwan's aid. They've unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't true, but they've actually built up a fairly good military that has naval, air, missile, cyber, electronic capabilities, amphibious capabilities, airborne capabilities, and it's only 90 miles across the strait. They've also done a very good job of incorporating their civilian shipping, particularly shipping. So it isn't this isn't the case that they absolutely have to have purpose-built amphibious ships, but rather they've got a lot of commercial ferries, roll-on, roll-off ships that could work very, very well. And so the point there is, I won't go into great detail here, but I think they do have a pretty good capability thinking they could take Taiwan. I think one should always say, yeah, it's be a piece of cake for them. I don't think it would be, but I think they could give it a pretty good shot. And they've had 50 years to put fifth columnists and their own agents in place in Taiwan that would cause all sorts of trouble. Now, does Taiwan have the ability to defeat Chinese attack? I think Taiwan, if they work things right, they could make things very costly for the Chinese. But over time, I'm not sure that by themselves they could withstand a Chinese attack. They really do need outside help, and they have not been helped by really the Americans isolating Taiwan for about 40 years and having almost no real military relations with them, in hopes that the Chinese would appreciate the gesture, but that Beijing apparently did not. Now, the lessons from Ukraine, just briefly, I don't think the Chinese have seen anything in Ukraine that would cause them really to hesitate when it comes to Taiwan. And I can discuss that later if people would like. But China does have vulnerabilities. They don't have enough food, they don't have enough energy, and they cannot really project power. They can't really protect their interests or defend their interests very far beyond China's borders. Maybe 500 to 1,000 miles off the Chinese coast, they can do pretty well. But beyond that, it drops off very quickly. So China would not be able to protect its trade routes and really the essential supplies that they need. And Xi Jinping knows this, and he's been trying to sanctions-proof the economy. And he's not been entirely successful, but he's certainly trying there. China also is really vulnerable to the fact that its currency is not freely convertible, which means it's about, if you try to use it overseas, the Chinese money, it's about like the scrip, these tickets you would buy at a high school fair. You can use it to buy like caramel corn and hot dogs at the fair, but take it off campus and nobody wants it. And that is a huge vulnerability. They're dependent on convertible currency, principally the US dollar, for some time to come, but they would like to be out of that problem. And the last real vulnerability I think they have is the top people in the Chinese Communist Party. They have immense personal wealth, and they have spent the last couple decades, if not longer, moving it overseas, ironically into the countries they call their biggest enemies, which is the United States, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom. They put it in actual cash, real estate, and having the ideal is to have a relative with a green card or residence permit as well. And that is potentially a huge vulnerability, is the fear of really the top leaders in this system, that they could lose everything themselves. But once again, it's just one sort of piece of the puzzle to consider. So that's my remarks on why Taiwan matters. And as I say, I'm not the last word on this, but I always welcome hearing things. And as I say, I always learn something, unless I'm talking to the U.S. State Department, where I used to work. But otherwise, I'll always learn something. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Grant, thank you so much for the comments, and that's quite the sharp warning that you're providing to us tonight. And I know it's probably generated a lot of great questions from all of our attendees. But before we open that up to allow you to ask those questions, we want you to have a chance to talk amongst yourselves and compare your impressions. And then as a group, probably only have groups of about 3 people, but as a group, come up with some questions that you would like to pass to Grant. So the way we're going to do this is first, we're going to break you up into these groups of 3 so you can talk about what you've just heard and then come up with 1 or 2 questions, if there's time, that you would like to ask him. And of course, if somebody else takes your question, you'll want to have some extra ones there. So also, please pick a spokesperson for your group and know what group you're in. So you have someone to ask the questions on your behalf. And we're going to give you 6 minutes in a breakout room to do that. And after we bring you back, we're going to start with group 1. And then you're each going to have about 5 minutes to ask those questions to Grant, and anything that you wanted to hear more about, other ideas or things, good questions of curiosity are what we're looking for, of course, always in Braver Angels. And then we're going to switch to group 2, and you'll have the same amount of time, and so on. And to ensure that we are mindful of everyone's time, I'm going to keep you to just your group's time period. So please take advantage of this opportunity to engage with Grant. And does anybody have any questions at all about the format or how we're going to go forth with this before we send you into the breakout rooms? Going once, going twice. Okay, Donna, are we ready to go?
We are almost ready. Some people have left and come, so let me just put them into.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
And if you do have to leave, remember this is being recorded and you'll be able to see it on our Braver Angels channel.
We are almost ready. I'm going to split one group into groups of 4, and then should be good. Sorry, it's taking so long. All right. I think we're ready to go. All right.
All right. Everyone have fun. Okay. And Donna Stiller. All right.
Looks good, Donna.
Yes.
That was great. If anyone needs to make a comfort break or something, like I said, we've got our timer on the breakout rooms. We got 5.5 minutes, so do it. Thank you. That was fantastic. That's a great opener. I think we're going to get a lot more out of the questions that get asked.
That was so interesting. Thank you so much, Grant. That
Isn't it?
kind of clarify. I don't know if you know, I'm going there next month to spread my son's ashes. Yeah, my son died there about 3 years ago.
Oh, no.
And yeah, so
excuse me, Donna, can I interrupt just a moment? There is a there are 2 Don Bracewells. One is in room 1 and one is in room 3. I wonder if one is video and one is audio.
Yeah.
They both, I think they both had video and audio, and I don't know why there were 2 with the same name.
Okay, maybe they just
Do we want to drop in there and make sure they're okay, or to let them?
That might be good.
Send it to PM. What are they?
All right,
for?
I'll jump in. I'll jump into room 1. Marietta, you want to jump into room 3?
Sure. And
okay, sorry.
Somebody left room 1. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Go in and check that out too, Jeff. And I'll be happy to go into room 3 if you want to send me in there. I did not look at their pictures, but I was assuming they may have been 2 different people with the same name. You can send me into room 3 if you wish, Donna.
Oh, okay. You can't just join it. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, well, I didn't even think about that. I guess I
Well,
can.
well,
Yeah, I will. But
Yeah,
Jeff's
okay.
back. What did you find out, Jeff?
Room one is good.
Okay. Do you want me to check room 3? I'll join and take a look.
Yep.
Okay.
And given it looks like we have just 8 groups, we'll get like 7 minutes. So I'm sure you can go into some depth, Grant, on these answers. We need time for about 7 minutes each.
Official guys, so I'm pretty much tapped out now. But I said it.
Got a lot of
that was it.
You don't know any more than what you've shared. That's
it. You've heard that all. Ma'am, have you been to Taiwan?
I have not. And my son lived there, and it was his favorite country in the world. He's been to many, many countries, and so I'm eager to go see it. And your explanation just gave me some. Looking at that map, wow. One of my friends was saying, "Look at it that way." And I said, "Yeah, whatever." But looking at that the way, it's like, whoa. And then, anyways, there's so much in your thing that really helped me see this. So I'll be much more enlightened, shall I say, when I go.
It's with the Taiwanese. You go there and you can't help but like them.
Yeah.
And, I can usually tell when I see Chinesey people overseas who's from Taiwan because they're happier. They will smile. And mainland Chinese, not so much at all. You can
so much.
And it's a free country.
Yeah.
It's that's one of the reasons the Chinese communists hate it, because it is an existential threat to their whole pitch.
Right.
Yes, Taiwan has its problems, but I think you'll enjoy it a lot. I say it's a free place.
Yeah. So. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
So you got about a minute to go. If the PMs,
I'm sorry,
you're good.
Got to send up.
Oh,
I sent it.
Oh, you sent it. Okay.
Yeah.
So as whatever, how much time we have left. So we're looking at 7 minutes per group. I'm going to keep, I guess I'll be the timekeeper, and then I'll ask you to sum up if we get within, once we get within like a minute or so at 6 or something like that, but you'll have another minute after that, Grant.
Okay.
Just so you don't have to kind of keep an eye on it.
Yeah. So we've got 8 groups times 7 minutes will be 56 minutes then. And you want me to jump in when there's 1 minute left and just state a reminder?
Yeah. Actually, let's drop it down to 6 minutes. That's probably going to be plenty. So at the 5 minute, just say 1 more minute with this group. That would be great.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you so much. Yes.
And I put all the names in our team cheat sheet.
Team cheat sheet. Oh, they're all coming back. Is that it? Okay, so pretty soon.
Kevin, do you see the room numbers? So it's 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11.
Thanks. Okay, yeah, good reminder. All right, 10 seconds. Here they are. Bringing everybody back. I know that you probably have developed a lot of great questions. Please go ahead and mute yourself, except for group 1. If we could have a spokesperson from group 1, you're going to have about 6 minutes to have a little conversation with Grant. Ask him any questions you have. So please go ahead. So Al Smith, Dan, you don't have to raise your hand. Go ahead, Dan. Just unmute yourself. And if you're the spokesperson, go ahead and ask.
All right. Thank you. Me and Al had the question. What are possible scenarios for how China would take Taiwan? We've heard that there could be a naval blockade, or they could attack the nuclear reactor. What are possible scenarios?
I've probably heard, I'll say everybody has their favorites. And there's probably a good dozen scenarios of what Chinese approach to taking Taiwan could be. Some people do mention a blockade, and that is actually is possible. And you could imagine, for example, if the Beijing announced, "Look, Taiwan is part of China. We are going to assert our administrative control over it, and therefore every ship that goes, an aircraft, we'll just start with ships that goes into Taiwan. It has to stop in China first, so we can check it out." That would certainly upset things a lot, and it would give some of the regional countries, say even Japan, South Korea, Australia, that otherwise probably would support Taiwan, it would put them in a position of saying, well, the Chinese haven't exactly attacked anybody, and if we resist, well, maybe we get a fight. Maybe let's just go along. So that actually could play out to Beijing's advantage, and that's is one scenario that I've heard that it could be, or it could be just an all-out blockade, naval air blockade, and warn everybody off, and that too is a possibility. And each of these, if they're not responded to really actively and forcefully by the Taiwan's friends, particularly the United States, if the psychological effect on Taiwan would be immense. But those scenarios, some people would say, well, the Chinese would rather go all out, just get it over with, and don't stretch it out so Taiwan and the rest of the world has the chance to get their acts together. And that's a possibility as well, sort of the all-out assault. And others have said, well, they may just take a couple of the offshore islands first, intimidate Taiwan into just sort of surrendering, and the rest of the world saying it isn't worth it. And because there's a few Taiwanese islands that belong to Taiwan that are really, I could swim from there to China, to mainland China. That's how close a couple of them are. The others I couldn't swim. And then there's other Taiwan has some other islands in the middle of almost the middle of the Taiwan Strait in the South China Sea. So some people say maybe they'll go after those first. But I tend to think that China would probably, as I try to finish it off very quickly. And that's one of the lessons learned from Ukraine, is don't stretch it out, but hit hard and go fast, and also isolate your target. I think that's probably what they would try to do. It would be it's my guess, just my reading of everything. And as I said, I think China has the naval and air capabilities. It's had 50 years to get the targeting down right, to have precision guided missiles to really blanket the island and really whap the place. And they have, as I said, cyber capability. They close down any satellites that Taiwan has access to, electronic warfare attacks, but also they have this fifth column that I mentioned. And this doesn't get the attention it deserves, as I see it. They've really have got agents in place, and they do have what we would call quislings back in the olden days. People of influence in Taiwan, they have subverted, groups they've subverted. And as I said, you may find yourself that the Chinese might have arranged to have a port opened up to them. The thinking is often, well, they'd have to go over the beaches like on D-Day, and that can be tough. But what if a port is, says, welcome, come on in? Well, that makes your problems a lot easier. So I would say that's what I would tend to see. I don't think China's going to try and stretch it out or send a message. But will they for sure? I don't know. But I think they do have the capability to think that they could. But there are a number of possibilities. And I've told you what I think. And with all of these predictions, you'll find that there's going to be one guy who gets it exactly right. And he is going to dine out for free for the rest of his life. And he is going to be considered a genius on everything for the rest of his life. And it'll be the only thing he ever got right. So of everyone who tells you, well, this is the scenario it's got to be, well, one of them's going to be right. But the rest of them, I think we usually find it's a little bit different than we think. But you can see where I would put my money on that.
That's our time for group one.
Oh, I used it. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine, Grant. But yes, so moving on to room 3. Do we have a spokesperson and question from room 3?
Yeah, room 3. We didn't select a spokesperson, but I guess I'll go ahead and do the speaking for sake of time. So one of the things our group said was, we need to project our leadership. We need to specifically state what the red line is to China. But I have a slightly different approach to this. Grant, what you're saying is that, China has advantage over United States in many ways, for actual war to take place. And I don't think that we want a war. Not because I think we'll lose. I think we will win. There's an all-out fight. However, I think amount of lives lost will be just tremendous. Amount of all the money and whatnot. So in whatever the thing that we have to do, I think we need to avoid war. So therefore, I like to propose a out-of-box thinking. And I'd like to get your opinion, Grant, since you also worked in the State Department. How about we initiate the discussion with China in the following approach? Okay, guys, let's face it. We don't want a war. We're going to have millions of people dying, and we're going to spend trillions of dollars on this war. So therefore, why don't we make a deal? Okay, you can go and have a Taiwan and let us annex Cuba. One for one, just move on. Oh, by the way, Russia, you can have a Ukraine. We're going to annex Venezuela. So let's have a peaceful way of making deals and move on so we don't have to have a big war and fighting. Out of the box of thinking. So what do you think, Grant? We need to avoid war. How can you save people by making some kind of deals? What do you think?
I personally would not. It is out of the box thinking. I personally just am not in favor of playing with people's freedoms like that. Saying just using them as a bargaining chip. That was actually kind of the thinking with Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia in the 30s. Well, we'll just let this little bit of Czechoslovakia go, and okay, you're happy with that, are you, Mr. Hitler? And we just call it even. And well, we saw the results of that. And I think they, as I say, just on that ground, I'm not willing to sort of turn 23 million free people into slaves, really become part of that Chinese system. There's no illegal immigration problem of people wanting to get into the PRC as it's run by the Chinese communists. And there are people trying to get into Taiwan. So on those grounds alone, I couldn't do it. But I think also one would find that it's probably not going to work out. That even if if somehow you could do these kind of wheeling and dealing, I think the PRC, the Chinese Communist Party, its intentions are to really dominate the world, if not control it. And Xi Jinping has actually said that us and the Chinese communist system and really the free world system cannot exist together. And he says that war may be necessary, but there's no I think, willingness to engage in this sort of horse trading, unless it's, yeah, I'll take what you give me, and then I'm going to take the rest of it as well. They do watch, of course, very careful in terms of not wanting a war. Well, nobody does. And though I think that when that's the case, you'll find that when there's two parties that, are at loggerheads, that the one that is the most ruthless, the one that appears, that is willing to keep doubling down, to keep the pressure on, they tend to have the advantage, particularly when there's one side that, their main objective is to avoid fighting, that they ultimately find themselves backed into a corner where they either submit or have to go to war. And as you, I think, correctly note, this would be bad news. Yes, the Americans and its friends might win, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. And as I said, the world would not be the same. But I think that my way of looking at this is, I tend to look at the 30s as a pretty good example of what happens when dealing with aggressive, authoritarian, really totalitarian regimes, is that the only way to stop it is to be willing and be able to make life pretty darn miserable for them if they do try anything. And the PRC, the communists, are always judging or gauging the state of affairs in the United States. Is it chaotic? What's the political situation? And how willing does an administration look? How much backbone does it look like it has to get up and fight? And there's also no reason why America can't have core interests and red lines. We often hear Beijing saying, "Well, this is our core interests," and a red line, as if it was chiseled in stone and to Moses on top of Mount Sinai. Well, we can have those as well, and we've never actually stated our interests as clearly as we might. But this, is how I would look at it, and as I say, it never hurts to think about all the alternatives. But this is when I'm not sure it would work, and I'm not sure the Cubans would be happy if we were there, nor the Venezuelans. And so, certainly given the difficulties of that, it's not one I would vote for if it was me.
Time's up there.
Okay, if we can move on to room 5. That was a great question, though, from 3. Room 5, Judy or Karen or Kent?
This is Judy. Judy and Karen met, and Ken, we weren't sure if Ken actually made it to our group or not. But I have 1 or 2 questions. Want to clarify. I think that the comment was made, China needs to dominate the countries around it. They need more food and energy. And the question was, is there not enough in China? I mean, is this in order to feed the people?
Yes, they really do not have the ability to grow enough food. Well, they might be able to for the different system, but that's a huge problem for them, and not least because that relatively little a little bit of land in China is arable, but also the environmental degradation and pollution, for example, has been a huge problem for the People's Republic of China. That's a problem, that they just don't have enough land to raise enough food that you can actually grow stuff, and that the people want to eat. But you'll notice that China has also made a huge effort to buy farmland overseas, and they have quietly gone about buying up a lot of farms, agricultural land in the United States. And the idea is you raise your food over there and you export it to China, and you're securing that food source. Smithfield hams. Now, I'm from Virginia, so I'm familiar with Smithfield hams. Right. And that was sold to a Chinese company maybe a decade ago. And it's a lot of the pork that they raise and a lot of the foods they produce go to China. A huge chunk of Ukraine actually had been leased to Chinese interests, and they produce from that it flows back to China. So they're well aware of this problem that they have. And same goes with energy. And China has been, all over the world trying to lock in contracts for oil as well. And one thing, though, that I've tried to keep in mind when considering this vulnerability is that if there's any group of people on Earth who can, say, withstand or endure hardship, it's got to be the people in China. And they could withstand, I say, more difficulty than I could. I think that most of us.
Ask my second question. Sorry, I'm afraid that I will only get one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
The relationship between China and Russia. I know that didn't go well for Russia and Germany, but what's the relationship between China and Russia?
Unfortunately, their strategic interests align at the moment, and they've got historic problems, and I think Mr. Putin must wake up every morning wondering if there's going to be 5 Shenzhens on his side of the Siberian border. That's huge, these big cities, because there's a lot more Chinese people in the Russian Far East. And there is no love lost. But as I say, their strategic interests align. And China has been from the beginning providing a lot of support to Russia for Ukraine. And they've even said, we're doing this because when the time comes to settle Taiwan, we expect Russia's help. That's actually been said by some people who you'd have to listen to. So unfortunately,
in Taiwan, they aren't really known for their agriculture as much as they are for their technology. They have a lot of very tall mountains there, very mountainous ski resort type areas, and so I'm not quite sure maybe it's more of a political or reputational thing.
Well, Taiwan, it does have a pretty substantial agricultural industry, but it does rely on a lot of imports as well, but particularly for its energy. I think it's only got something like 2 weeks worth of fuel as it is, if it did come to that. So Taiwan does have that problem as well, just like Japan has.
Sure. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, appreciate that. We are going to move on to room 6. So Kelly, Kim, Lisa, you have a spokesperson? All right,
They
Kim.
kindly appointed me. Thank you so much for answering this question. So what is your opinion about the Western world? Is it capable, or will it come together cohesively to form an alliance against China if it were to blockade or all out go after Taiwan? And who would those allies be?
That's a good question, and I don't think anybody quite knows the answer to it. I would like to think that it would, but I think that most people will be looking to the United States for its leadership. And I think if the U.S. shows that it is committed to Taiwan and really willing to risk a fight, that I think you would then find more people willing to sign up to come along with us. I think the British would, just because they usually do. I think the Australians would. The Japanese probably would. If you listen to Prime Minister Kishida's speech in Washington, I've never heard a Japanese leader give a speech like this. He was very clear that China's a threat. China is doing this, and this. This is bad, and Japan is going to support the United States on this. So I think Japan would be a big help, and they would also be an essential help. It'd be very hard to operate in any Taiwan scenario without Japan's support. The Southeast Asians, I'm not so sure just who would be on our side. I think even our friend Singapore would try to stay on the fence as long as they could with that. And in Europe, you would find, I think the East Europeans would probably help us. I'm not so sure about the Germans or the French. It's always hard to tell. But the rest of the world, as I noted, I'm not so sure that Latin America, Africa, and there's a lot of countries there. I'm not so sure how they would side, and I'm not so sure it would be us. At best, they might stay neutral. But if the Americans show that they're committed, I think then you have a chance of success. And that's why the success at getting other countries to join in. And that's why, as I said, the Chinese look so closely at what's going on in Washington, D.C. And they have always been trying to size up an administration and the people in it. And that is the one, it's as much a factor as I think Taiwan's actual defense capabilities when they look at things. They're also looking at the state of the affairs in the United States, because we're the ones that I think are the big obstacle for them. But it really, a lot depends in Washington in this case, and I'm not so sure just how it would go.
Thank you.
I think we have another minute or so. If you had another question from that group.
Yeah, I'd like to just comment on Grant's question. Answer.
Hold on, Jet. I will hold you to the end, because I think we're gonna have a little bit of extra time if you want to wait until the end, and we'll open it up again after that. So nothing else from room 6. Let's go to room 7. So Cleo, Frank, Jim, please go ahead and ask your question.
I spoke too much, so they nominated me. So I'm Jim. And you've sort of answered one of our questions. Actually, the number one question you came up with was, you didn't give an opinion on whether you thought there would be a broader war. So I'd like you to, if you would be willing to give an opinion. Half of that question was, what would it look like? I think you've already answered that. But I'll give all my questions at once, then I can be quiet. So the other question was, going back to the 1930s, when it could be argued that our containment and isolation of Japan was one of the reasons Japan had reason to go to war with us. Are we isolating and containing China, therefore giving them the incentive to go to war with us, as opposed to a policy where Biden has talked about partnership, but being less aggressive, not that we wouldn't defend Taiwan, but that can we stall that? And the last thing is part of the question about what would a broader war look like. You've probably read the book Ghost Fleet, in which the Chinese knocked out all of our communications. So would that be part of their strategy, do you believe, not only to knock out Chinese satellites, but also the Americans, so that would be impossible for us to respond? That's all of my questions.
Okay, well, those are all good ones. Of the containing China question, are we sort of boxing them into something that they have to get out of? I don't think so. We've spent really the last 40 years accommodating the People's Republic of China. It really was U.S. money, U.S. technology, and our support, and overlooking everything they've done that really has built the Chinese Communist Party and the PRC into a force that can take us on. And so there's nothing more we could have done to roll over for them. And I think they're looking for a fight. It's just the nature of their regime. And that's how I would address that one. The question of a global war, I think it probably would be one. What it would look like, there's probably 10 novels to be written about that. But I would expect, for example, if there is a fight over Taiwan, to have North Korea make a move of some sort. So then you've got a fight on or around the Korean Peninsula. I'd expect them to hit Tokyo, hit Japan with missiles. You've got Japan that's suddenly brought into the war as well. Wouldn't surprise me if Russia made a move in the Balkans, all intended partly as a supporting effort for a Chinese attack on Taiwan, but also you never know what you might get out of it as part of the spoils would be one way to look at it. I would expect the U.S. to really go after Chinese overseas interests. And as I'd mentioned, I think Chinese international trade would stop. They wouldn't be able to move any ships, and even aircraft would have some trouble. And to do that, you have to put forces all around the world. But the idea, I think, that it would be a short, contained war just around Taiwan, I don't see that happening. But I do see a global fight. And that Ghost Fleet question, it is a good book. I think that is something that we better take very seriously, is that Chinese, if the PRC did attack, you just might find, say, anti-ship missiles being fired by their fishing boats, sinking a lot of U.S. Navy ships, drone attacks on U.S. ports, U.S. airfields, taking out all the aerial refuelers lined up at a U.S. air base. And then you've got some real problems. The cyber attacks on key infrastructure, the ATMs don't work, the Wi-Fi is off for 15 minutes, which would, drive most of us completely nuts. But I think you would have to expect, those kinds of attacks. And one thing about the PRC is that when looking at how American experts have assessed them for so long, it's as if there's a condescension to it, as if, well, they're just not as smart as us. They'll never be as good as us. Well, the Chinese in general, and unfortunately, the PRC, the CCP, in some respects, they're probably smarter than us. But that condescension has not helped us over the years. And one good example was a U.S. Navy admiral in 2009 visiting China. He was asked, "Do you mind if China has aircraft carriers?" He says, "No, not at all. In fact, I'd be glad to help them as much as I can." Well, the Chinese have aircraft carriers now, and unfortunately, they're figuring out how to use them. And I forgot to mention Iran, and you can see what kind of trouble they've caused. And I think as soon as this thing is over, everyone's going to look at the internet news to see what's going on with them in Israel. So,
1 minute left.
Okay, I think it would be sort of a worldwide fight. And as I said, I just don't. The world would not be different. It'd be something none of us have experienced before. But that idea that we're containing China and that we've caused them to do these things. Now, I'm not buying it, but you hear it all the time. And I think that there's never been a country more welcomed into the international system than the People's Republic of China. And, well, the idea was that they would, with this kind of accommodating treatment, would sort of turn into like a really big Canada, at least the way Canada used to be. But that was never going to work. Partly, why would the Chinese even want to do that? They're getting what they want. And it all has done really is created a country, the force that could cause us no end of trouble, as I see it. So.
Okay, thanks for that. We are going to move on to room 8. So, Melissa, Tracy, or Wen, if you have a spokesperson.
Yes, I'm a spokesperson. My name is Melise. And our question is, why are so many countries not concerned about Taiwan?
That's once again a good question, especially for people like me who live and breathe the subject, and have an opinion on it all based on sort of how the information shakes out for me. I think but you'll often find, even within the United States, you will hear, I think as we know, you'll hear many people saying, well, why does Taiwan matter? It's just some rocks far away. It's a country far away about which we know little, as Chamberlain said about Czechoslovakia. I think maybe it's human nature in a lot of ways, is that people, their focus is on more immediate things. And even people who follow foreign affairs would, so they'd have something else they're focusing on, Ukraine, Gaza, for example. And you just you can only have so much bandwidth to look at things and kind of get to understand them and understand the importance. And then I think a lot of people, you will find in a lot of countries where they actually see the PRC as the good guys. Or the country that, their understanding of the problem, such as it is as well. Taiwan is just part of China, so China wants it back. Of course, what's wrong with that? And that's historically incorrect. And there's many other levels on which it's not accurate or the approach to take. But there's a lot of people who think that. And one could easily get that impression because I point out that the U.S. government has not been very good at making the case as to why Taiwan is not, in fact, part of China. They have it's a mindset, it's an idea that has been allowed to take hold. There's plenty of people who see that, and the Chinese have been very successful actually at political warfare, and particularly winning over, usually with bribes, the leaders of many countries, generally not, well, sometimes democratic-ish ones, and buying support that way. And you see that in many countries, and that includes that these countries have to agree that, well, the Taiwan position to take is Beijing's. So there's a number of different reasons for it. And then there's, of course, people and governments that just will do anything to avoid a war. And sometimes if you're willing to do that, and that would involve selling out or giving Taiwan away, you sometimes end up with an even bigger war. But it's a lot of things I can track back to what I would call human nature, but also Chinese political warfare, and is part of the game that they have played very, very well. And in the United States. I would note that there was a group of businessmen who went to China recently, and they had an audience with Xi Jinping. And there's a video of it at the last part of it where they're making their comments to Xi Jinping. And one of the fellows who speaks is a former colleague of mine in the U.S. government. And if you listen to what he was saying, oh my goodness, I think it gives the word fawning a whole new meaning. But so it's within our country, you'll find this complete range of opinions on China, and sometimes it has a lot to do with money, as in his case, money he's getting. But so.
And Jeff, do we have more time for additional questions from that group if they have them?
Yeah, we have 2 more minutes.
Okay, I have this is a question I haven't shared with my group, but we often hear that Russia's success in Ukraine, if they succeed in Ukraine, that'll give China the go-ahead to go into Taiwan. What is your opinion on that, and how do you think that would pan out?
Unfortunately, I think it's probably accurate. That any sign that Mr. Putin has gotten away with what he's done in Ukraine and has been allowed to get away with it, I think that would give Xi Jinping a lot of encouragement to go after Taiwan. And I think the Chinese communists are counting on, I think, the free world having either short attention spans or else not having the stomach for a long fight, and be willing to sort of get used to it if, say, Taiwan is attacked and conquered, that he may be counting on America, particularly the business class, just pressing the White House to get back to normal. You may have the Germans do the same, the German business, and do the same thing, for example. So I'm afraid that if it looks like the Russians have been successful in Ukraine, that this would I think, be seen as a good thing by the Chinese when they think about their future activities towards Taiwan. And I think that looking at the problems that the Russians had in Ukraine from the start and even up till now, if you look at those, I believe that the Chinese, Xi Jinping, just probably thinks that they're not going to make the same ones. That they can avoid those. They look at what the Russians did by not going in fast and hard, by not isolating Ukraine. I think that he's probably thinks we're not going to make those mistakes. And he also looks at how Putin has played the nuclear card by sort of implicitly saying, maybe I'll have to use nuclear weapons, and apparently getting the Americans and others to back off. That I would expect, in the event of any assault on Taiwan, that part of that would be Beijing telling the Americans, look, this is a domestic matter, stay out, and if you don't, it's going to be nuclear war. And a certain type of administration just might be influenced by that. So in my opinion, I'm not so sure that the Chinese have noticed anything with Ukraine that would give them pause. And the only thing that would be a sound defeat of the Russians, and that we can discuss what defeat looks like, but certainly something that looks like it wasn't worth the cost, no matter how you weigh that. That would be my way of looking at it.
Time's
Yeah,
up.
thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to room 10. Paul and Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and then let the other two mention. I just want to mention that I grew up and was born in Cuba, and we would not appreciate being traded off as a pawn for somebody else. The question that I have is why would this be worth it to China to go to war? I mean, I think the economic dependency and the economic trade with the rest of the world would be so devastatingly wrecked. It just doesn't make any sense. They depend so much on the U.S. and developed nations. If they are dependent upon us for food, that would be cut off. They have an elderly population, and that seems to be a real problem for them. And lastly, don't they feel any kinship with the people of Taiwan that they're claiming to be Chinese? I mean, that's their family. Why would they attack and destroy their own family?
Okay. Well, in terms of the last question, the last observation, the Chinese Communist Party has killed at least 50 million of its own citizens in mainland China in peacetime and good weather, and 50 million is probably an underestimate. The nature of this regime, like all communist regimes, is that they'll stack up the bodies if it will keep them in power and give them something they want. So that I don't think they'd have any trouble killing a whole lot of Taiwanese to get their way. That would be my reading of that. In terms of the economic case, I agree. It doesn't make economic sense to start a war or to go to war over Taiwan. And it's not logical, but regimes like this often do things which are not logical. And Xi Jinping, I think he probably thinks he could, make up the difference. If his trade with, say, he can't get, Smithfield hams from the U.S. or get soybeans from the Midwest, well, the Brazilians will sell it to him. Somebody else will. Even the Russians could, hand over some food as well. But also, if he's successful, he may find that some countries which would otherwise have stiff-armed him might be more willing to do business with him. So I think the sense is that they can absorb the hardship. He refers to it as having to eat bitterness or eat grass. I think they can handle the economic pressure. And he also, as part of this dynamic, one reasonably speculates that Xi Jinping wants to solidify himself as one of the greats in Chinese history. And the way he puts it is, if by taking Taiwan, you have restored China, restored its greatness, rejuvenated the nation. And he will have done what no other leader could do. Mao Zedong couldn't do it. And sometimes I think that does shape the way, say, a regime like this, why they do things. And it's not as if many people are going to tell him, to counsel him otherwise on this. So that would be sort of my take on it. Is it worth it? If you ask all the people who are going to die and who are going to suffer from this, I don't think so. But in this, once again, sort of human nature, the human experience, you get a certain kind of system with a certain kind of leader, and the heartache involved in sort of getting rid of these systems is just immense, unfortunately. That would be my take. And yes, I would. I can't imagine the Cubans going willingly to become our 52nd state or a protectorate. That's just how it looks to me.
Jeff, do we have time for an additional question from that group? Or?
Yes, we do. We have 3 more minutes.
Okay. So room 10, Paul, Tom, did you have additional questions?
Sure, I'll ask this question. This is Paul. I liked Tom's questions, but Grant, if you could elaborate a little bit more, let me state. So I generally do not like to assume the worst of let's call it rivals or opponents, even enemies, because I believe human nature is not, automatically necessarily want to kill you. Nevertheless, I will say on this issue, as a native-born Taiwanese who spent most of my life in the U.S., I and as a political scientist, actually, I'm a faculty member who teaches political science, but nothing to do with international relations. My own suspicion is that, as you've carefully mentioned, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and their regime, this sounds terrible. I don't normally say this, but I feel on some level I would not trust them either. And I was wondering if you could address that, because I know if this were a debate, I would ask you, well, Grant, don't you think you're biased? You just have a bias against China in favor of Taiwan because you're an American, you say you love democracy, but in the end, you just have a hatred toward commies. What would you say in response to that?
Well, when it comes to, as I say, a regime that distrusts its people so much that it has to have black prisons, that it puts them in concentration camps, has organ harvesting, taking organs out of live prisoners who disagree with them, suppresses religion. And also, as I said, 50 million dead in peacetime and good weather. That's not a very good track record for a regime, any regime. And it's hard for me to imagine why anyone would put in a good word for it. Then someone would argue, well, the Chinese communists raised all these millions of people out of poverty. Well, they put them in poverty in the first place. And all they had to do was stop torturing them and starving them and killing them. And the natural industriousness of the Chinese people took over. That wasn't so complicated. If China was to become like Taiwan, then I don't think anybody would have any problem with that. So in this case, I think just looking at the track record, it's hard not to assume the worst of it. It's more communism. It's communism. It's not Chinese people that are the problem. In fact, Taiwan, shows us that Chinese people thrive in freedom and democracy. And if the Chinese communists won't give them an election, won't let them have consensual government, well, I think that speaks for itself. That is always the argument made that, oh, you're racist, this and that. Well, no, we support freedom. And that's why I wish the Americans would do more to protect Chinese people in the United States, both recently arrived long-term residents and Chinese American citizens who are being pressured by the Chinese government, intimidated by them. And America has not done anywhere near enough to protect Chinese people. So I think actually by supporting Taiwan, we are in fact protecting Chinese. And also the poor China under the Communist Party. It reminds me of how South Africa used to be. Used to hear from the Afrikaners that, well, this is the only way that Africans can be handled is brutally. They need force. That's the only, and even Jackie Chan said that about Chinese. Well, look across the strait. Look how well Taiwan is doing. They say China's problems have everything to do with the nature of its regime, not with the Chinese people themselves. And the Chinese regime, you could change the race and you get the same results. It has very little to do with sort of the species we're talking about. Those would be my observation of it. But I just don't know how.
Time's up.
Again, not assume the worst, and also name a treaty they've actually followed or an agreement they've actually followed. I'm glad to wait. So that would be my response to that. But I expect that I get the question all the time or the accusation frequently.
Okay, we're going to move on to our last group. And Jet, I'll tell you right now, I don't think we're going to have time for additional questions, but I'll get you in touch with Grant so you can have a one-on-one with him at some point. But John and Pamela from room 11, what is your question for our distinguished presenter?
I'm sorry to say I don't think we worked it all out. Roman is also a member of our group. Roman or Pam, do either one of you want to go ahead? Well, okay, I'll go ahead. Colonel, Are there any treaties in existence that might lend support to the Western defense of Taiwan? NATO, or there's a Pacific triad, I believe, that consists of India, Australia, and the United States, something like that. Anything like that?
Actually, there are. It's not NATO, but there are several treaties the United States have, which, in theory, and in the meaning of the treaty, do obligate a few countries to get involved if if the U.S. forces are attacked or U.S. territory is attacked in the Pacific. And this would apply to Australia, which actually does have the obligation to help. The Philippines, oddly enough, has a similar obligation to get involved, and this is in response to our obligation to support them if they are attacked. And South Korea does as well in certain circumstances. Potentially, say, if U.S. forces are attacked, and particularly, say, if U.S. territories are attacked. That the South Koreans might have a treaty obligation to join in. The Thais, with whom we have a treaty, they don't. They wouldn't have any obligation there. The Japanese, oddly enough, their treaty only requires us to defend Japanese territory, but it only requires them to help if U.S. forces in Japan are attacked. But as a practical matter, I think we would find the Japanese doing an awful lot to assist. I think they're not doing enough to prepare at the moment, in my opinion, but they would be, I think if push came to shove, they would probably help us. But treaties, if a country wants to weasel out of a treaty, that's what lawyers are for. So it's not as if you can say, we got a contract, you better come. But as a political matter, as a practical matter, you do want your friend. You expect people to live up to their side of a bargain. And if they don't, that has its own effects as well. But NATO, I think what we would expect from NATO, even though they would not be obligated to join in the Pacific, we would expect them to help us, say, economically, if we applied economic and financial sanctions on the PRC in the event of a Taiwan situation, we'd expect them to help. And also to take care of themselves, because we would find ourselves really stretched if there was a fight in the Pacific. And it's even worse now that we have obligations in Ukraine, Western Europe, and also the Middle East. The U.S. has finite resources, and I don't think we've got enough. So we would expect some other countries to take care of themselves while we're trying to do what's necessary out west.
Thank you.
Okay, we are coming up close to our time, so I am going to conclude the question portion of this. We do still have some final important business, and let me do a quick screen share here for you. We want to make these events as interesting and as enjoyable as possible, and we want to ask your help in doing that by filling out a short exit survey for us. Just point your camera at the QRC code or enter the tiny URL. Marietta and Jeff are also putting that link into the chat right now. I also want to extend an invitation to all of our fellow veterans, including you, of course, Colonel Newsham, to join us at our future events. If you'd like to join our team and continue your mission of defending the nation by helping us unite it in meaningful political dialogue, you can reach out to us at thattinyurl.com/MVG-welcome. And join us at our next welcome event, which will be on the 27th of May at 7 p.m. Eastern. That link should be available via the braverangels.org/events page, which of course has all of the Braver Angels events that will be coming up that might be of interest to you. If you want a copy of the chat where all this good information is, you can get a copy of it by clicking on the three dots in your chat window and selecting the Save Chat, and it will be sent to you via email. All right. So, Grant, I just want to say once again, this has been fantastic, eye-opening. Your book I read is definitely one I would recommend. Incredibly well-researched and thorough in its analysis, not only of what Taiwan and China might mean, but what China is doing today and what we need to be aware of. Thank you again so much. This has been an absolute joy and greatly appreciate everybody coming tonight. Thank you so much and have a pleasant evening.